This is a case in which, in the prior matter, we requested $1 million bail, $1 million minus $1 bail, and we did not get it. We don't set bail, judges do. The bail was set at $200,000. Why? Well, probably because the commissioner who set the bail probably imagined that was enough to hold Keon King in custody. It wasn't.
A young woman leaves her house at night. She's done this 100 times before. Same route, same job, same quiet Philadelphia streets she's walked her entire life. By 10:24 p.m., she ceases to exist. Not missing, not lost, erased. Her phone, silent. Her car, gone. Her body hidden in the cold earth behind a school where children once played, now rotting and abandoned, surrounded by trees that saw everything and said nothing. For 14 days, the ground kept her secret. When they finally found Kada Scott, she was face down in a shallow grave, a bullet through her skull. Execution style, cold, calculated, planned. But here's the part that should make your skin crawl. She knew him. She had texted him that very night. He had called her 12 times in the 40 minutes before she vanished. And somewhere in those messages, buried in digital evidence investigators would later uncover, were 4 words that now feel like a scream from beyond the grave. Kidnap me again. What did she mean? Was it a joke? A twisted inside reference? Or had she already survived something with him once before and didn't realize she wouldn't survive it twice? The person who killed Kada Scott didn't need to break into her house. He didn't need to stalk her in the shadows. He was already inside her life, already trusted, already close enough to destroy her the moment she let her guard down. This is Roped Crimes. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear isn't just a murder case, it's a warning. Tonight, we walk through the final hours of Kada Scott's life, step by step, and we ask the question no one wants to answer. How do you see the danger when it looks like someone you already know? Kada Scott was 23 years old. She wasn't supposed to die. She was supposed to graduate. She was a nursing student, someone who had chosen a career built on caring for others, on showing up when people were at their most vulnerable. She worked the night shift at an assisted living facility in Chestnut Hill, a quiet neighborhood in northwest Philadelphia, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The kind of shift most people avoid. The hours when the world sleeps and you're alone with the elderly, the sick, the forgotten. But Kada didn't mind. She was dependable. She was kind. She showed up. On the night of October 4th, 2025, she did what she always did. She spent time with her mother. Normal conversation, normal evening, and then just before her shift, she left the house. Her mother was the last person in her family to see her alive. Kada was expected at work by 10 p.m. She never arrived. But before she vanished, before her phone went dark, before her car disappeared, before everything unraveled, something strange was happening. Her phone was ringing. Over and over again, between 9:25 p.m. and 10:12 p.m., Kada Scott received approximately a dozen, all from the same number, all from the same person, Keon King. At the time, investigators didn't know who he was. Her family didn't know why he was calling so persistently. But the phone records don't lie. In those final minutes before Kada's signal went dead, he was trying to reach her, repeatedly, urgently, and she responded. Text messages between the two were later recovered. The tone was casual, familiar, they communicated before. In one exchange that would later haunt investigators, Kada typed something that seemed playful, or maybe desperate, depending on how you read it. "Kidnap me again," Keon replied. "Better be up too." Then they made plans to meet, plans that put them in the same place at the same time. At 10:24 p.m., Kada Scott's cell phone stopped transmitting. No more calls, no more texts, no more pings off nearby cell towers. Just silence. When Kada didn't come home the next morning, her family knew something was catastrophically wrong. This wasn't like her. She didn't just disappear. She didn't ignore calls. She didn't skip work. Panic set in fast. Her mother filed a missing person report. Friends began posting on social media. Search parties formed. Flyers went up across Philadelphia with Kada's face on them, smiling, young, alive. But no one could find her. Days passed, then a week, then 2. The city held its breath. Police began piecing together her last known movements. Surveillance footage from the assisted living facility showed she never arrived. Her car, a vehicle she depended on, was missing. Witnesses reported seeing a black Hyundai Accent near the area where she was last known to be. Then came the break investigators had been dreading. The car was found, burned, torched beyond recognition in a different part of the city. Whoever had taken it wanted to erase the evidence, wanted to make sure no fingerprints, no DNA, no trace of what happened inside that vehicle would ever be recovered. This was no longer a missing person case. This was something far worse. And the clock was ticking. The investigation moved fast once Kada's family reported her missing. But what detectives found wasn't answers. It was a carefully constructed puzzle designed to hide the truth. Cell tower data became the first thread investigators could pull. Kada's phone had pinged off towers throughout the evening, tracking her movements as she prepared for work, as she received those relentless calls from Keon King, as she exchanged those haunting text messages. But at 10:24 p.m., the signal didn't just weaken, it didn't fade as her battery died or as she moved into a dead zone. It stopped, completely, as if someone had turned it off, or destroyed it, or made very sure it would never transmit again. Investigators traced that final ping to the Aubrey Recreation Centre in Germantown, a public park that sits directly beside the abandoned Ada H. Lewis Middle School. During the day, it's a place where families bring their children. At night, it's empty, dark, and the school next to it, boarded up, condemned, forgotten, casts long shadows across the parking lot. Surveillance cameras positioned near the recreation centre captured something that made investigators' blood run cold. A vehicle matching the description of Kada's car was seen arriving at the parking lot shortly after her phone went silent. It didn't stay long, just long enough for whoever was inside to do what they came to do. But the vehicle wasn't the most disturbing part. The next day, October 5th, just hours after Kada had been reported missing, those same surveillance cameras captured two figures moving through the area near the abandoned school. They weren't walking casually. They weren't jogging. They were carrying something between them, something large, something that sagged with dead weight, something that required both of them to manage. The footage is grainy, the lighting is poor, but the shape is unmistakable. They were carrying a body. The two figures moved toward the wooded area behind the school. Dense trees, overgrown brush, the kind of place where you could dig without being seen, and then they disappeared from view. When Kada's car was discovered days later, it had been driven miles away from the school and set on fire. The interior was gutted. The seats melted, the dashboard warped beyond recognition. Whoever burned it wanted to make absolutely certain that no forensic evidence would survive. No blood, no hair, no fingerprints. Nothing that could tie them to what happened inside that vehicle. This wasn't panic. This wasn't someone trying to cover up a mistake in the moment. This was methodical, calculated. Someone who understood exactly how much evidence a car could hold and how to erase it. Meanwhile, the search for Kada intensified. Volunteers scoured neighborhoods, divers checked rivers, dogs sniffed through parks. Her face was everywhere, on the news, on social media, on flyers taped to telephone poles across Philadelphia. But the more investigators dug into the hours before her disappearance, the more one name kept surfacing. Keon King. The phone records didn't lie. He had called her repeatedly that night. He had texted her. He had made plans to meet her. And according to cell tower data, his phone had pinged off the same towers as hers in those final minutes before her signal died. He was there. Detectives obtained a warrant for King's phone records, his social media accounts, his known addresses, and what they found confirmed their worst fears. On October 18th, 14 days after Kada Scott vanished, investigators returned to the abandoned middle school. They walked into the woods behind it, retracing the path those two figures had taken on the surveillance footage. And there, beneath a thin layer of dirt and leaves, they found her. Kada Scott. Face down, cold. A single gunshot wound to the back of her head. The Philadelphia medical examiner would later determine she had been killed within 20 to 30 minutes of her phone going dark, which means she didn't suffer for days. She didn't spend 2 weeks trapped somewhere hoping someone would find her. She was dead almost immediately, shot, buried, forgotten. And Whoever pulled that trigger had walked away, burned her car, and tried to disappear into the city like nothing had happened. But forensic evidence doesn't lie. Surveillance footage doesn't forget. And cell phone data leaves a trail that's almost impossible to erase. Keon King was arrested shortly after Kada's body was discovered. When Keon King was arrested, the charges weren't just for murder. They were extensive, deliberate. The kind of list that tells you this wasn't a crime of passion or a tragic accident. This was planned. Murder, robbery, theft, violation of firearms laws, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, kidnapping, arson, possession of an instrument of crime. Each charge represented a different piece of what happened to Kada Scott. Each one painted a clearer picture of how thoroughly someone had tried to erase her and how close they came to succeeding. King was arraigned and held without bail. Prosecutors presented their case methodically, piece by piece, building a timeline that left little room for doubt. The phone records showed King had called Kada approximately 12 times in the 47 minutes before her phone went dark. The text messages showed they had communicated, made plans, arranged to meet. Cell tower data placed both of their phones in the same location at the same time, near the Aubrey Recreation Centre, right next to that abandoned middle school. And then there was the surveillance footage, the vehicle arriving at the parking lot, the two figures carrying something heavy through the darkness, the timestamp matching perfectly with when Kada's phone stopped transmitting. But perhaps the most damning evidence was what investigators found when they examined the timeline more closely. Kada Scott was last seen leaving for work at approximately 9:45 p.m. Her phone went silent at 10:24 p.m. The medical examiner determined she had been killed within 20 to 30 minutes of that moment, which means Kada Scott didn't disappear into some unknown void for 2 weeks. She didn't run away. She wasn't held captive somewhere, given time to escape or be rescued. She was dead before midnight, shot in the head, dragged into the woods, buried in a shallow grave behind a school where children once learned and played, now a tomb for a young woman who never got the chance to finish her own education. And for 14 days, while her family searched, while volunteers posted flyers, while the city held vigils and prayed for her safe return, her body was decomposing in that cold ground. Hidden, forgotten, just a few feet away from a public park where people walked their dogs and children played soccer. The person who killed her had continued living their life, walking the same streets, breathing the same air, as if nothing had happened. But the evidence was overwhelming. The digital trail King left behind, the calls, the texts, the cell tower pings, created a map that investigators could follow step by step. The surveillance footage showed movements that matched the timeline exactly. The burned car was an attempt to destroy evidence, but it only confirmed that whoever was responsible knew they needed to hide something. And then there was that text message, the one that investigators kept coming back to, the one that felt like a warning Kada had sent without even realizing it. Kidnap me again. What did she mean? Had something happened between them before? Had King done something to her previously, something she survived, something she thought was over, something that made her feel safe enough to joke about later? Or was it darker than that? Was it a plea disguised as playfulness, a way of saying don't do this without actually saying it? Because she was scared of what would happen if she confronted him directly? We'll never know. Because the person who could answer that question is buried in Ivy Hill Cemetery now. 23 years old, her nursing degree unfinished, her future stolen. Keon King sits in a jail cell, awaiting trial. The evidence against him continues to mount. Prosecutors are confident. The case is strong. But none of that brings Kada Scott back. None of that erases the terror she must have felt in those final moments, when she realized the person she knew, the person she had texted with, the person she had agreed to meet, was the last person she would ever see. Kada Scott left her house on October 4th, 2025 to go to work. A routine she'd done countless times before. Same job, same route, same quiet Philadelphia night. She never made it. Not because a stranger snatched her off the street, not because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, not because of some random, senseless act of violence that no one could have predicted. She never made it because someone she knew, someone who had her phone number, someone who had texted her, someone who had called her 12 times that night, decided she wouldn't. And that's the part that should keep you awake tonight. We teach ourselves to fear the shadows, the dark alleys, the strangers who watch us a little too long on the subway. We learn to lock our doors, to check our backseat before getting in the car, to never walk alone at night. But what do you do when the danger doesn't hide in the shadows? What do you do when it texts you back, when it knows your schedule, your habits, your routines, when your brain reads it as familiar, as safe, as someone who would never hurt you? How do you even recognize the threat when it doesn't look like one? Kada Scott's phone was ringing in those final minutes. She answered. She texted back. She made plans. And somewhere in her mind, she must have believed she was safe. Because why wouldn't she? This was someone she knew. But knowing someone doesn't mean you're safe from them. Sometimes it means the exact opposite. It means they know exactly how to reach you, exactly where you'll be, exactly when you're most vulnerable. And by the time you realize the danger, it's already too late. Kada Scott was buried for 14 days before anyone found her. 14 days while her killer walked free. 14 days while her family searched and prayed and hoped. And the scariest part? If it weren't for surveillance cameras, cell tower data, and investigators who refused to stop digging, he might have gotten away with it. So here's the question I want you to sit with tonight. Would you have seen the signs? Would you have known? Or would you have answered the phone just like she did? If this case shook you the way it shook me, leave a comment below. Tell me what you think happened in those final moments. Tell me if you believe there were warning signs no one caught. And if you want more cases like this, real, raw and unflinching, stay with Rope Crimes. Subscribe, hit that bell, because we don't just tell these stories, we honour them, we remember them, and we make sure they're never forgotten. Kada Scott was 23 years old. She deserved to graduate. She deserved to live. She deserved better than a shallow grave behind an abandoned school. Rest in peace, Kada. We won't forget you.